This video looks at spaghetti straps and two different techniques for turning them once they're sewn. Spaghetti straps provide an endless number of design options for shoulderless or backless garments and dresses. Now with spaghetti straps, I normally like to cut them on the bias, so lining a set square up with the selvage edge of a piece of fabric, and if your set square has a 45-degree angle, that will give you the perfect bias across the fabric. Now we could make straps on the straight, but they tend not to sit so nicely and they're much harder when you sew them inside out to turn them the right way out. With the bias, there is that bit of give in the fabric, so it's easier, it will accommodate turning inside out. So what I'm going to do is I want to find the longest piece of fabric here. So I'll move the set square up to the very, very top, and I'm going to draw a line indicating the 45-degree angle on the fabric. So then in terms of the width of the spaghetti strap, I'm going to aim for about 0.7. So if we're looking at the set square here, 1 centimetre would be to here. 0.7 is roughly here. So I need to double the width of the strap and add seam allowance. So 0.7, if I round that up to 1.5 for both sides of the spaghetti strap, front and back, and seam allowance, it means I'm working with 3.5. I'm going to demonstrate two techniques. I'm going to cut out two pieces of fabric. So on this side here, I am marking out 3.5. And I'm going to mark out 3.5 on the other side here as well. So then I'm going to cut out the two straps. Just to examine the pieces of fabric beforehand, it's quite difficult to turn a spaghetti strap if there's a piece of selvage on the end. So it's important to remove the selvage. Keep the angle here on the straight of grain, as this will be useful when turning the strap the right way out. So the first technique I'm going to use uses a tool called a loop turner. So the loop turner here has a little hook up at the top, and that will enable me to turn it the correct way around. So the first step on the first technique would be to fold the bias strap in half, just putting a few pins in, and it's important to pin it so that I don't accidentally sew it with this too far up or too far down, in which case you can end up with lots of pulls in the strap. And because I'm aiming for 0.7, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the fabric up in the machine literally with the side of the fabric here lined up with the side of the foot, because that's something that's quite easy to measure. So I'll start to stitch and then back stitch a little. Okay, and then it's okay to pull the fabric a little bit here. I don't want to over pull it, but again, this strap will stretch in wear. So a little bit of stretch is okay here. Now, I like to place my finger on the edge of the foot here because it means I don't have to watch too much if the fabric is lined up evenly here. I could watch the other side, but this side is less important. This is the folded edge, so this is the strap. I'm way more concerned about how the strap is going to look here. The next step now is just to trim some of this excess seam allowance off the side. Because I will be turning this inside out, this wouldn't fit exactly in. It would be a very, very tight fit. So I'm just going to trim it down maybe by close to a half, but definitely not too much, or you'll end up with a hole when you turn it the right way around. This is the piece here ready to work with. So now I'm going to work with the loop turner. So the loop turner has a little handle down this end to enable you to pull, and then it has this tiny little hook up at the top with a little latch to close the hook. So I'm going to run that up through the inside of the binding or the spaghetti strap here. So right down to the very end. And once the loop turner comes through on this end, what I need to do is grab enough of this spare fabric here into the hook down at the end and then close this little catch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the hook maybe around the edge of the fabric here and then force the little hook through the fabric. Okay, so it's actually come through the fabric here, and I've grabbed quite a good bit of it, and then that's the little latch closed. So at this point now, what I want to do is to pull this ring down on this end, and that will pull the end of the fabric through. So just go easy until, okay, so that's the first bit has come through now quite happily. So we can push the fabric off the end here, which if we look at the whole length is pulling the fabric off the hook here. So I need to go easy enough until the hook comes through the end. Okay, so I've got the hook through now on this end. This is the inside of the fabric through. On this type of technique is typically done maybe on evening wear or maybe more slippy or fancy fabrics than this dry one. So I will need to reorganize the fabric. So I've now pulled it through and you can see the fabric has suffered quite a bit in the process. So what I now need to do is to help the fabric to recover just a little bit. So if I go to the end here, what we're doing is we're finding the seam on the side, and by twisting the fabric around a little bit like this and flattening it out, we're able to flatten out all of the seam allowances here. So I know the seam allowances are now flat on the inside. So do that process the entire length until you're happy that the fabric on the inside is flat, because otherwise when I press it, I'm just going to press the seam allowances into lumps. I am just starting to press from this end. Probably the most important thing when you're pressing is to make sure that the fabric is lining up here, and that if you choose to, you can press this seam so that it is slightly overlapping on one side like this, so that when you view it from the other side that there will be no sign of the seam. Okay, so that is the finished spaghetti strap. Now for the second spaghetti strap, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that you don't have a loop turner, or possibly the piece of strapping or the piece of bias binding that you want to turn into a spaghetti strap is too long to use a tool like this. Okay, so with this second strap, what we're going to do is we're actually going to sew a ribbon into the inside of the strap, and we can use the ribbon to pull it out the right way afterwards. So what I'll do before I start is I will just put a little crease in the strap so that I know where the fold is going to go. Make sure that you fold the strap right side to right side or inside out. Okay, and then on the end where I'm going to start the sewing, what I need to do is to line up the ribbon in the opposite direction to the direction that the strap is going in. And I want to sew this ribbon close to the center. I'm choosing the point halfway between the crease and the edge, and I need to stitch that down. So just stitching the ribbon in place. What we need to do is to align the ribbon just along the crease. So where I've creased this in the middle here, the ribbon is going to align down on the side of that crease there, and then I'm going to fold the ribbon over, and then I'm going to sew this closed. But I need to take care here not to sew the ribbon. So I'm going to start just a little bit further down, because I don't want to catch the bit of the ribbon at the very, very top here. So now each time I stitch, I need to align the ribbon into the crease, fold the binding over, and this time I'm leaving a millimetre or so sticking out on the outside because I don't want to stitch the ribbon by accident. Okay, so obviously it's important here that the ribbon is quite fine. So lining the ribbon up here again with the crease, folding the binding over, and then stitching in a straight line down. This is the finished length here, so the ribbon is just being folded into the inside here. Seam allowance the whole way down, and I have a little bit of ribbon sticking out on the end. So in order to turn this inside out, the same as the last time, I need to reduce the seam allowance. So again, not by too much. So I'll take it down by about half. The seam allowance section is a little bit smaller. I can actually see through here now that I haven't actually sewn the ribbon in, and I've left plenty of space. I could have actually sewn it a little bit smaller. Now what we need to do is to pull the ribbon on this end, but don't pull on this end. The first thing we need to do is to get this end of the binding inside. So pulling the ribbon until the binding here disappears in. So you can see it's just starting to pop in here. Okay, and you can see it actually in the light. You can see the end of it is now here where the ribbon is. So the ribbon is really nicely attached. It's perfectly flat. And the really good news with this technique is I didn't have to scrunch this entire piece up to fit it onto the tool that I used the last time, because the ribbon can be as long as the section you're working with. So this is really coming through quite nicely, and I'm not so concerned about the end here where I know the little ribbon is sewn on, but I can keep it quite flat on this end up here, and I'm not getting as many sort of scrunched gathers on the ribbon as I did the last time. So you can see the end now with the ribbon sewn on is just starting to come through. So here it is now on this end. So I can just pull through the last section here. Okay, so again, the same as the last time, I just need to resettle any of the crinkles. I can cut the ribbon off on this end. Done with that. But again, anything that seems like it may be a little bit gathered or tucked up on the inside, so to follow the seam allowance edge here as neatly as I can, and just to squiggle the fabric a little bit to flatten it out. Okay, so just giving this one a little press. Because I know that both of these straps will stretch a little in wear, especially if there's a heavy dress or top hanging from them, I'm stretching both of them out a little bit before being ready to attach them to a garment. So these are the two spaghetti straps from the front. The one on the right hand side is the one that I did with the ribbon, and the one on the left is the one that was done with the loop turner. These spaghetti straps add an endless array of options for finishing the back of a garment. So crossing them over is an option. Using them as a tie on the back of the neck is a really nice option for them. And this technique works brilliantly for ties anywhere on a garment.